The late afternoon sun, a molten gold, spilled across Willow Creek Dog Park, painting the manicured grass in hues of amber and rose. It was a sanctuary, a place where the usual anxieties of city life melted away with the wagging tails and slobbery greetings. Today, however, the air hummed with a different kind of tension, a dissonant chord in the symphony of barks and playful growls. I'd just arrived with Barnaby, my magnificent, if somewhat awkwardly proportioned, Pembroke Welsh Corgi. Barnaby wasn't exactly built for intimidation. He was a lowrider, a furry sausage with legs that seemed to have been designed for keeping him close to the ground, not for launching attacks. His ears, those magnificent radar dishes, were perpetually perked, swiveling independently to capture every rustle of leaf, every distant siren, every whispered secret of the canine community. His tail, a mere nub of perpetual enthusiasm, was a blur of pure joy. He was, in short, the embodiment of adorable. We'd barely made it through the double-gated entrance when a voice, sharp and laced with an almost theatrical disapproval, sliced through the cheerful cacophony. "Oh, for heaven's sake, the dog!" My stomach tightened. I knew that voice. It belonged to Karen. Karen, with her perfectly coiffed blonde bob, her designer athleisure wear that probably cost more than my rent, and her poodle, Princess Fluffybutt III, a creature of such delicate sensibilities that it trembled if a butterfly dared to flutter too close. Karen was the self-appointed guardian of Willow Creek Dog Park, the self-proclaimed expert on all things canine, and, unfortunately, the resident purveyor of unwarranted judgment. Barnaby, blissfully unaware of the impending drama, was already sniffing a particularly interesting patch of grass with the intense concentration of a bomb disposal expert. His stubby legs propelled him forward, a furry torpedo of curiosity. I offered Karen a tight, forced smile. "Hello, Karen. Beautiful day, isn't it?" She sniffed, a delicate, dismissive sound. "It was," she said, her gaze fixed on Barnaby with an unnerving intensity. Princess Fluffybutt III, a cloud of white fluff with beady, judgmental eyes, was pressed against Karen's impeccably clean leggings, emitting a series of high-pitched yips that sounded suspiciously like a tiny, pampered alarm system. "Barnaby's just settling in," I explained, trying to keep my tone light. "He loves this park." "He loves it." Karen's voice rose, attracting the attention of a few other dog owners who were now subtly glancing our way. "Well, I don't know if we love him being here." My smile faltered. "I'm sorry, what do you mean?" Karen took a step forward, her chin held high. Princess Fluffybutt III mirrored her stance, puffing out her chest in what I could only assume was an attempt at looking formidable. "I mean," Karen enunciated each word with painstaking clarity, "that dog is intimidating." I blinked. Intimidating? Barnaby? The dog who, just moments ago, had been trying to befriend a discarded plastic bag? The dog whose most aggressive act was to occasionally trip over his own feet? Intimidating? I repeated, a disbelieving laugh escaping my lips. "Karen, he's a Corgi." "Precisely," she declared, as if I'd just confessed to a heinous crime. "They have that low, menacing posture, and those teeth, you can see them when he pants." I glanced down at Barnaby, who was now enthusiastically investigating a particularly fascinating dandelion. His mouth was slightly open, and yes, if one squinted and had a vivid imagination, one might perceive a glimpse of molars. But menacing? They were the teeth of a creature who primarily used them for enthusiastically devouring kibble and occasionally gnawing on his favorite squeaky toy. "Karen, he's a Corgi," I said again, trying to inject a note of calm reason into the escalating absurdity. "They're known for being friendly and, well, not intimidating. They're practically bred for cuddles and short walks." "That's what they want you to think," Karen countered, her eyes narrowing to slits. It's a deceptive tactic. They lure you in with their stubby legs and their wagging tails, and then bam! They're all over you, demanding attention. Possibly nipping. I felt a flush of heat rise to my cheeks. Barnaby had never nipped anyone in his life. His idea of assertiveness was to nudge your hand for more ear scratches. He's never nipped anyone, I stated firmly. He's a rescue. He's incredibly gentle. He's been through a lot, and he's just so happy to be here, to be loved. The mention of him being a rescue seemed to ignite a fresh wave of indignation in Karen. Oh, a rescue. That explains it. Probably has a history of aggression. They're unpredictable, you know. You can't trust them with other dogs, or worse, with children. A small child, no older than 5, toddled past with his mother, his eyes wide as he took in the scene. Barnaby, sensing a potential new friend, perked up and gave a little happy whine. Karen visibly recoiled. See, he's already eyeing the child. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You need to remove him. Immediately. For the safety of everyone here. My jaw dropped. You want me to remove Barnaby from the dog park because you think he looks intimidating? Because he's a Corgi? Yes, Karen said, her voice unwavering. It's for the good of the community. We can't have animals that cause distress. Princess Fluffybutt III is clearly distressed. She gestured to her poodle, who was currently attempting to lick a speck of dirt off her designer shoe. I looked around the park. Most of the other dogs were engaged in their own joyful pursuits, chasing balls, wrestling, or simply enjoying the open space. None of them, as far as I could tell, were cowering in fear of Barnaby. In fact, a boisterous golden retriever was already bounding towards us, its tail thumping a happy rhythm against its sides. Karen, I said, my voice laced with a growing exasperation, Barnaby is a fluffy, short-legged dog who loves to play. He's never shown an ounce of aggression. He's a rescue, yes, and he's a testament to the fact that these dogs can be wonderful companions. Your assumptions are completely unfounded. Unfounded? Karen scoffed. I'm an excellent judge of character, and that dog has a predatory glint in his eye. I followed her gaze to Barnaby. He was looking at the approaching golden retriever, his tail giving a tentative wag. The predatory glint was, I suspected, the reflection of the setting sun in his innocent brown eyes. He's looking at another dog, Karen. They're at a dog park. That's what they do. Well, I'm not taking any chances, Karen declared, her arms now crossed defensively. If you don't remove him, I'll have to speak to the park management. A cold dread settled in my stomach. The park management. They were notoriously by the book, and if Karen managed to spin some convincing narrative of a dangerous dog, they might actually listen, regardless of the truth. I looked at Barnaby, his little body quivering with anticipation as the golden retriever got closer. He was so full of life, so eager to be a part of this canine social scene. The thought of him being banned, of him being judged and rejected because of a ridiculous prejudice, was unbearable. You can't be serious, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I am, Karen stated, her tone as hard as granite. And if you don't take your intimidating Corgi and leave, I will be calling them right now. The molten gold of the sun seemed to dim, and the cheerful barks of the other dogs suddenly sounded like a distant, mocking chorus. My sanctuary had just become a battleground, and I knew with a sinking heart that this was only the beginning. My stomach tightened. I glanced down at Barnaby, who was currently engrossed in sniffing a particularly fascinating patch of grass near my feet. He'd wagged his stubby tail at everything that moved since we'd arrived, his big radar dish ears swiveling with unbridled curiosity. Intimidating? The only thing Barnaby intimidated was the floor, when he'd inevitably trip over his own paws, trying to chase a butterfly. Intimidating? I repeated, trying to keep my voice level, though a tremor of disbelief was starting to snake through it. He's a Corgi. A Pembroke Welsh Corgi. His legs are shorter than his ears. Karen sniffed, a delicate sound that suggested she'd just inhaled something foul. That doesn't matter. It's the look. The way he holds himself. He looks like he's plotting something. She gestured vaguely with a perfectly manicured hand, her diamond-studded bangle catching the fading sunlight. And I saw him looking at that little girl over there. He was practically drooling. I followed her gaze to a small child, maybe 3 years old, who was gleefully chasing a bright red ball near the park entrance, her mother hovering nearby, completely at ease. Barnaby, bless his heart, was still meticulously investigating the grass. He hadn't even acknowledged the child, let alone drooled in her general direction. He was too busy with the thrilling olfactory adventure unfolding beneath his nose. He wasn't looking at the child, I said, my voice growing firmer. He was focused on a dandelion, and he hasn't drooled once. He's a rescue, and he's the gentlest dog I've ever met. He's never shown an ounce of aggression. "Oh, a rescue!" Karen scoffed, a familiar dismissive lilt in her voice. It was the same tone people used when they talked about slightly used furniture or bargain bin clothing. That explains it. You never know what kind of baggage they come with. Probably has a history. You can tell by the teeth. She peered at Barnaby again, her eyes narrowed. Those teeth look sharp. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes so hard they'd get stuck. Barnaby's teeth, as far as I could tell, were the teeth of a creature who primarily used them for enthusiastically devouring kibble and occasionally gnawing on a squeaky toy. They were small, white, and utterly non-threatening. "He's a puppy, technically," I countered, grasping at straws. "He's still got his baby teeth, mostly, and he's never even growled at another dog. He just wants to play." "Play?" Karen's laugh was like a tiny, sharp shard of ice. "Is that what you call it? I saw him earlier. He was sniffing at Princess Fluffybutt 3 with a rather predatory glint in his eye." My jaw dropped. Princess Fluffybutt 3, a cloud of white fluff with beady, judgmental eyes and a permanent expression of disdain, was currently perched on Karen's lap, looking like a pampered, living accessory. Barnaby had, indeed, approached Princess Fluffybutt 3. He'd sniffed her delicately, given a tentative tail wag, and then, when she'd let out a series of high-pitched, indignant yips, and Karen had snatched her away as if Barnaby were carrying the plague, he'd promptly lost interest and trotted off to find something more engaging. A dandelion, for instance. He was being curious, I explained, my patience fraying. Princess Fluffybutt 3 was making noises. Barnaby didn't know what to make of it. He's never encountered a dog like her before. Honestly, I'm not sure anyone has. Karen hugged Princess Fluffybutt 3 closer. She is a purebred miniature poodle, a very sensitive breed. And she is clearly distressed by your dog's aggressive advances. Aggressive advances? I threw my hands up, the gesture earning me a few curious glances from other dog owners scattered across the park. He sniffed her. That's how dogs greet each other. It's like saying hello. Well, your dog's hello is terrifying, Karen stated flatly, her voice leaving no room for argument. And I won't have it. I come here for a peaceful afternoon with my princess. I don't need some low-slung menace scaring her. Low-slung menace? A laugh, sharp and incredulous, escaped me. He's a Corgi. He's built like a furry torpedo of curiosity, not a menace. Look at him. I pointed to Barnaby, who, at that very moment, had discovered a particularly interesting-looking stick and was attempting to pick it up, his entire back end wiggling with the effort. He looked less like a menace and more like a furry, four-legged exclamation point. Karen barely glanced at him. "I've made up my mind. I'm going to speak to the park management. This is a public facility, and we need to ensure the safety and comfort of all patrons. Your dog is a clear and present danger." My heart sank. Park management. That sounded official. And terrifying. I pictured Barnaby being blacklisted from every dog park in the city, his innocent, wiggly spirit crushed under the weight of Karen's unfounded accusations. A danger? I tried one last time, my voice laced with desperation. He's a Corgi. He's about 2 feet long and 10 inches tall. His greatest threat is to the structural integrity of my sofa when he's trying to get comfortable. He's not a danger to anyone. He's just short. Short and intimidating, Karen corrected, her tone final. She stood up, carefully adjusting Princess Fluffybutt III on her hip. I suggest you take him home before I have to take further action. I have your dog's registration details. I know your license plate number from when you pulled into the lot. My blood ran cold. She'd noticed my license plate? This wasn't just a fleeting moment of neighborhood pique. This was a calculated, determined attack. Karen wasn't just a grumpy dog owner. She was a purveyor of unwarranted judgment, armed with an apparent encyclopedic knowledge of park patrons and a poodle named Princess Fluffybutt III. You can't do that, I stammered, my mind racing. You can't ban him based on your opinion of his breed. That's discrimination. It's called being a responsible citizen and protecting the innocent, Karen retorted, her gaze fixed on Barnaby with an unnerving intensity. You clearly don't understand the importance of maintaining a safe environment. Some dogs are just not suited for public spaces, especially not this park. She turned to leave, Princess Fluffybutt III letting out a final, triumphant yip. As they walked away, Karen was already pulling out her phone, her slender fingers flying across the screen. I watched them go, a knot of dread tightening in my chest. The molten gold of the sun seemed to dim, casting long, ominous shadows across the manicured grass. The cheerful symphony of barks and happy panting suddenly felt like a distant, mocking chorus. I looked down at Barnaby. He'd finally managed to wrestle the stick to his satisfaction and was now trotting proudly back towards me, his tail giving a happy thump-thump against his sides. He nudged my hand with his wet nose, his big brown eyes full of uncomplicated affection. He was my happy, goofy, lowrider, and he was utterly oblivious to the storm that had just brewed over his adorable, stubby head. I knelt down and buried my face in his soft fur. He smelled faintly of grass and sunshine and dog shampoo. No trace of menace, no hint of aggression, just pure, unadulterated dog. But Karen's words echoed in my mind. A clear and present danger, not suited for public spaces. This wasn't going to be easy. I had to fight this. I had to protect Barnaby. But how? How do you fight someone who sees a corgi and imagines a wolf? How do you convince a Karen that a wagging tail is a sign of friendship, not a prelude to an attack? Barnaby licked my cheek, his tail giving a hopeful little wag. He was ready for more park adventures, more sniffing, more chasing of imaginary foes. He had no idea he was already in a battle for his right to exist in this seemingly idyllic sanctuary. And I, his staunch defender, felt a cold dread settle over me. This was more than just a disagreement at the dog park. This was a fight for Barnaby's reputation, and by extension, my own. I knew, with a sinking certainty, that Karen wouldn't stop here. She was too invested in her narrative of perceived danger. She would find a way to make my life, and Barnaby's, difficult. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, and I realized that the peaceful afternoon I'd envisioned had just dissolved into a looming conflict. I had to prepare. I had to strategize. Because if I didn't, Barnaby, my sweet, short-legged corgi, might just be banned from his happy place for the cardinal sin of being too darn cute. The molten gold of the sun seemed to dim, the amber and rose hues of the sky now feeling less like a gentle farewell and more like a warning. Karen's stance hadn't budged. She stood like a statue carved from pure, unadulterated judgment, her perfectly coiffed blonde bob practically vibrating with self-righteousness. Princess Fluffybutt III, nestled in the crook of Karen's arm like a fluffy white accessory, let out a series of sharp, high-pitched yips that sounded suspiciously like tiny, pampered applause. My jaw, which I suspected had been hanging open since Karen's initial pronouncement, finally snapped shut. My stomach, which had been doing anxious flip-flops, tightened into a knot. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a full-blown, irrational war, and my opponent, armed with impeccable athleisure wear and a deeply flawed perception of canine intimidation, was not backing down. Intimidating? I repeated, my voice a little higher than I intended. I glanced down at Barnaby, who was currently engaged in a highly scientific investigation of a dandelion. His little tail, a fluffy question mark, gave a tentative wag as he sniffed. His entire body was built so low to the ground, he looked less like a predator and more like a furry, four-legged speed bump. He's a Corgi. He's shaped like a loaf of bread with legs. The most intimidating thing he's ever done is try to steal a dropped piece of pretzel from under my nose. Karen sniffed, a delicate sound that managed to convey a universe of disdain. You say that, but you don't see him the way I see him. The way he stalks around, the way his ears, those enormous radar dish ears, swivel. It's predatory. And that low profile? It's for ambushing. Ambushes. Barnaby ambushing whom? A rogue squirrel? A particularly slow-moving ladybug? I pictured him, a stout, low-riding tank, attempting to pounce, only to end up skidding on his belly in the grass. The image was so absurd, I nearly laughed, which would have been a tactical error of epic proportions. He's a rescue dog, I said, trying to inject a calm, reasonable tone into my voice, though the exasperation was bubbling just beneath the surface. He's been through a lot. He's probably just curious. And those ears? They're for hearing the treat bag crinkle from a mile away. That low profile is... well, it's just how Corgis are. It's their charm. Princess Fluffybutt III let out another volley of yips, her tiny, beady eyes fixed on Barnaby. It was the kind of look that said, "You are beneath me, and also, you smell faintly of generic dog shampoo." Charm? Karen scoffed. I call it deceptive. He looks harmless, I grant you. Like a fluffy sausage. But I've seen that look in his eye. That glint. It's the look of a dog who knows he can get away with anything. And frankly, I don't want that kind of influence around my princess. She adjusted her grip on her poodle, as if shielding it from an invisible, corgi-shaped menace. I took a deep breath, counting to 10 in my head. The usual cacophony of the dog park, the happy barks, the excited panting, the distant thud of a thrown frisbee, suddenly felt muted, a dissonant chord struck by Karen's sharp pronouncements. Other dog owners, their faces a mixture of curiosity and mild concern, were beginning to cast glances our way. I could feel their eyes on us, a silent jury forming. With all due respect, I began, choosing my words carefully. You're projecting. Barnaby is a gentle soul. He's more likely to offer a comforting lick than a threatening growl. He wouldn't hurt a fly. He's afraid of the vacuum cleaner, for heaven's sake. Karen's lips thinned. Fear is a different matter than aggression, and I've seen enough to make my judgment. He's too imposing. For this park. For the other dogs. I'm going to have to report this to the park management. They have rules about disruptive animals. My heart sank. Disruptive? Because he's a corgi? Is there a specific rule against short legs and big ears? There are rules about anything that makes other patrons feel unsafe, Karen stated, her voice dropping to a low, serious register that was meant to sound authoritative. And I, for one, feel unsafe when that That creature is allowed to roam freely. He's a liability. A liability. My sweet, goofy Barnaby, a liability. It was so outrageously unfair, so utterly ridiculous, that a part of me wanted to burst out laughing hysterically. But another, more pragmatic part, the part that had spent months patiently working with Barnaby, celebrating every small victory, knew this was serious. This woman, with her warped perspective and her insistence on her own unassailable judgment, had the power to make our lives difficult. I don't understand, I stammered, my voice catching. He's never bothered anyone. He's never shown an ounce of aggression. He just wants to play. He's a rescue. He deserves a chance to be a happy, well-adjusted dog. And other dogs deserve to play without the threat of a low-slung menace lurking around, Karen retorted, her gaze fixed on Barnaby once more. He'd finally finished his dandelion inspection and was now trotting happily towards a group of retrievers, his tail wagging furiously. He looked, to anyone with a modicum of sense, like a furry torpedo of pure joy. To Karen, apparently, he looked like a tiny, furry assassin. "He's not lurking, he's playing," I said, my voice rising again. "He's a Corgi. They're a herding breed. They're supposed to be low to the ground. It's in their DNA. It's not a sign of aggression. It's a sign of being a Corgi." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Your emotional attachment is clouding your judgment. I'm not going to argue with you. I've made my decision. I will be filing a formal complaint. You'll hear from park management." With that, she turned on her heel, her designer athleisure wear swishing indignantly. Princess Fluffybutt III gave one last, disdainful yip before being whisked away. I watched them go, my mind reeling. The sun had dipped lower, casting long shadows across the grass. The cheerful atmosphere of the park had been irrevocably tainted. Barnaby, oblivious to the storm that had just brewed around him, trotted back to me, his stubby tail a blur of motion, his amber eyes shining with innocent affection. He nudged my hand with his wet nose. A silent question. "Are we still playing?" My heart ached for him. He was just a dog, a good dog, a dog who had finally found his place in the world. And now, because of one woman's bizarre, unfounded paranoia, his haven was under threat. I knelt down and buried my face in his soft fur, inhaling his familiar, comforting scent. He licked my cheek, a warm, wet reassurance. "It's okay, boy," I murmured, stroking his back. "It's okay, we'll figure this out." But as I stood up, watching Karen and Princess Fluffybutt III disappear through the park gates, a grim certainty settled in my gut. This wasn't going to be easy. This was just the beginning. Karen was determined, and her brand of prejudice, however ridiculous, was real. I had to protect Barnaby, not just from her unfounded accusations, but from the possibility of being banned from the very place where he was meant to be happiest. I looked around the park, at the other dogs and their owners, a sudden wave of paranoia washing over me. Were they all secretly judging Barnaby? Were they siding with Karen? The fight had begun, and I had a feeling it was going to be a long and ugly one. I just hoped that Barnaby's undeniable corginess, his inherent adorableness, and my own fierce determination would be enough to overcome the irrational fear of a woman with a poodle and too much time on her hands. I scooped Barnaby into my arms. He felt surprisingly light, a bundle of happy energy, nothing like the imposing beast Karen had painted him to be. As I carried him towards the exit, I vowed to myself that I wouldn't let this woman strip Barnaby of his joy, his right to be a dog. I would fight this. For Barnaby. The air, which had moments before been filled with the cheerful cacophony of happy barks and the comforting scent of sun-warmed grass, now felt thick, charged with an unpleasant tension. Karen, having delivered her parting shot with the air of a queen banishing a peasant, turned on her heel. her perfectly coiffed blonde bob practically vibrating with self-righteousness. Princess Fluffybutt III, a cloud of white fluff with beady, judgmental eyes, trotted obediently at her side, emitting a series of high-pitched yips that seemed to be a distant, mocking chorus to her owner's pronouncements. I watched them go, my jaw still slightly ajar, a knot of disbelief tightening in my stomach. Intimidating? Barnaby? My Barnaby. The dog whose greatest ambition in life was to amass an impressive collection of squeaky toys and whose idea of a daring escapade was stealing a dropped crumb from the kitchen floor. He was currently engaged in a vigorous sniffing session at the base of a particularly interesting-looking oak tree, his stout body wiggling with concentration, his magnificent radar dishes of ears swiveling independently to catch the faintest rustle of a leaf. He looked less like a predator and more like a furry, four-legged loaf of bread investigating a particularly fascinating patch of dirt. A few other dog owners, who had wisely kept their distance during Karen's tirade, now cast sympathetic glances my way. One woman, with a boisterous golden retriever whose tail seemed to possess a perpetual motion machine, offered a small, apologetic smile. I managed a weak one in return. This was my life now, apparently. Navigating the treacherous waters of dog park politics, where one entitled woman with too much time and a poodle could turn a perfectly pleasant afternoon into a diplomatic incident. Karen's threat hung in the air, like a storm cloud. I'll be speaking with park management. This is a matter of safety, you know. For heaven's sake. What safety? The only danger Barnaby posed was to the structural integrity of my couch when he got the zoomies, or to my diet when he masterfully employed his sad puppy eyes to secure extra treats. I knelt beside Barnaby, stroking his surprisingly soft fur. He nudged my hand with his nose, his tail giving a tentative thump-thump against the grass. He seemed utterly oblivious to the drama he had apparently caused. He was just being Barnaby, a Corgi, a lowrider, a happy-go-lucky, stubby-legged, big-eared Corgi, the very antithesis of intimidating. But Karen had planted a seed of doubt, a tiny, insidious weed of worry. What if she did complain? What if park management, bless their bureaucratic hearts, took her at her word? Would Barnaby be banned? The thought sent a fresh wave of indignation through me. This was his park, too. He'd been coming here for months, a regular fixture, a beloved member of the canine community, known for his polite greetings and his willingness to share his favorite tennis ball, after a brief, enthusiastic slobbering session, of course. I stood up, scanning the park. The sun, a molten gold, was beginning its slow descent, casting long shadows across the manicured grass. Other dogs were chasing balls, wrestling playfully, or simply enjoying the freedom of open space. It was a picture of canine contentment, a scene I cherished. I couldn't let Karen, with her warped perception and her pampered poodle, ruin it. I decided a proactive approach was necessary. I needed allies. I started to walk, Barnaby trotting happily beside me, his short legs a blur of motion as he kept pace. I approached the woman with the golden retriever, whose name I knew was Sarah from previous encounters. Her dog, a golden whirlwind named Cooper, was currently trying to herd a flock of pigeons with more enthusiasm than success. "Hi, Sarah," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "That was quite a spectacle, wasn't it?" Sarah sighed, expertly redirecting Cooper's attention away from the avian escape artists. "Oh, Karen, she's a piece of work, isn't she? Don't take it personally. She's got a problem with pretty much every dog that isn't her princess. She thinks Barnaby is intimidating," I confessed, feeling a flush of embarrassment despite myself. Because of his posture and his teeth. Sarah snorted, a sound that was surprisingly unladylike but entirely understandable. "Intimidating, Barnaby? He's the most adorable, low-profile little guy I've ever met. He looks like a furry sausage roll with ears. And his teeth? They're the teeth of a creature who primarily used them for enthusiastically devouring kibble, not for tearing flesh. She paused, then added with a mischievous glint in her eye, "Honestly, the only thing Barnaby intimidates is my own willpower when it comes to resisting his puppy dog eyes." Her words were a balm. It was good to hear someone else's objective assessment, someone who saw Barnaby for what he truly was. That's what I've been saying. But she seemed so convinced. She's threatening to report me to park management. "Oh, she's always threatening that," Sarah said, waving a dismissive hand. "She's tried to get Buster banned because he's too boisterous, and she's complained about Daisy's excessive shedding." "Daisy's a bichon frise, for crying out loud. Don't let her get to you. Most of us know she's just a purveyor of unwarranted judgment." A small spark of defiance ignited within me. Sarah was right. Karen was a known quantity, a recurring nuisance. Her pronouncements held no weight with the regulars, the people who actually spent time at the park and knew the dogs. "Thanks, Sarah," I said, feeling a little lighter. "It's good to know I'm not alone in thinking she's, well, a bit much." "You're definitely not alone," Sarah assured me, her smile genuine. "Just ignore her. She thrives on confrontation. The less attention you give her, the less power she has." I continued my circuit, greeting a few other familiar faces. Each conversation reinforced Sarah's assessment. Barnaby was loved. Barnaby was not intimidating. Barnaby was, in fact, a delightfully fluffy ambassador of good cheer. There was Mr. Henderson, a gruff but kind man who always had a pocket full of dog biscuits, and his lumbering Bernese mountain dog, Bruno, who regarded Barnaby with the gentle tolerance of a seasoned elder. There was Maria, whose energetic terrier mix, Pip. Barnaby regularly engaged in epic, albeit short-lived, wrestling matches. "Heard you had a run-in with Karen," Mr. Henderson said, his voice a low rumble. He offered Barnaby a biscuit, which the Corgi accepted with a grateful, tail-wagging wiggle. "Don't you worry about her, young lady. She's got more bark than bite, that one. And her poodle's no better, all fluff and fury." Bruno let out a soft woof, as if in agreement. Barnaby, biscuit safely in his belly, nudged Bruno's massive paw with his nose, a gesture of interspecies camaraderie. The scene was peaceful, ordinary, and exactly what the dog park was supposed to be. But even with the reassurances, a lingering unease remained. Karen had made a specific threat, and her intensity had been unsettling. She hadn't just voiced an opinion. She had acted like a prosecutor presenting a case. The image of her perfectly made-up face, contorted with disapproval, flashed in my mind. She had the conviction of someone who genuinely believed she was protecting the innocent. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, a familiar figure appeared at the far end of the park. Karen. She was walking with purpose, her stride brisk, Princess Fluffybutt the Thrur trotting beside her, looking as if she'd just stepped out of a doggy salon. My stomach tightened. It seemed my reprieve was short-lived. She made a beeline for me, her eyes, sharp and unwavering, fixed on Barnaby. He, oblivious, was currently attempting to dig a hole that would rival the Grand Canyon, his stubby legs churning with admirable dedication. "I've just been speaking with the park manager, Mr. Davies," Karen announced, her voice cutting through the pleasant hum of the park. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "I've lodged a formal complaint regarding your dog. Safety concerns, intimidating appearance, and potential aggression." I stood up, brushing grass off my jeans. Barnaby, sensing a shift in attention, poked his head out of his hastily constructed excavation, his tongue lolling out in a happy pant. He looked up at Karen, his tail giving a curious, questioning wag. "Aggression?" I repeated, my voice rising despite my best efforts to keep it calm. "Karen, he's a Corgi." He's never shown an ounce of aggression in his life. He's a rescue dog, yes, but he's the gentlest soul you'll ever meet. Gentle or not, his breed is known for certain traits, she retorted, her chin held high. And his stature, his teeth. It's a deceptive tactic. One cannot be too careful, especially with children around. She gestured vaguely towards a group of toddlers playing in a designated area far across the park, none of whom had so much as glanced in Barnaby's direction. Deceptive tactic? I echoed, incredulous. Are you serious? He's a Corgi. His teeth are for chewing his food, and his stature is, well, it's Corgi stature. He's built like a furry torpedo, not a wolf. And he's never once shown interest in children, other than to perhaps accept a dropped biscuit, which he hasn't even done. Princess Fluffybutt III let out a series of sharp, indignant yips, as if to underscore her owner's every word. It was like watching a tiny, pampered alarm system go off, a miniature echo of Karen's own shrill pronouncements. Mr. Davies said he would review the matter, Karen continued, ignoring my exasperated protests. He takes these complaints very seriously. He'll be in touch. In the meantime, I suggest you keep your dog under stricter control, or perhaps find a more suitable venue for him. She gave Barnaby a final, withering look, a look that seemed to convey a deep-seated suspicion of all things short and furry. With another disdainful sniff, Karen turned and marched away, Princess Fluffybutt III, a fluffy white shadow at her heels. The other dog owners, who had again discreetly retreated, now began to emerge from their self-imposed safety zones, their faces a mixture of sympathy and suppressed amusement. I sank back down onto the grass, a heavy sigh escaping me. The molten gold of the sun seemed to dim, casting a more somber light on the park. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Karen had escalated this from a personal vendetta to an official complaint. I had a feeling this was just the beginning of a rather unpleasant battle to defend Barnaby's right to enjoy his local dog park. I looked down at Barnaby, who had resumed his enthusiastic digging, completely unfazed by the human drama he had inadvertently instigated. He was just a dog, a good dog, a Corgi, and I would fight for him. The late afternoon sun, a molten gold, spilled across Willow Creek Dog Park, painting the manicured grass in hues of amber and rose. It was a sanctuary, a place where the usual anxieties of city life melted away, with the wagging tails and slobbery greetings. Today, however, the air hummed with a different kind of tension, a dissonant chord in the symphony of barks and playful growls. I'd just arrived with Barnaby, my magnificent, if somewhat awkwardly proportioned, Pembroke Welsh Corgi. Barnaby wasn't exactly built for intimidation. He was a low rider, a furry sausage with legs that seemed to have been designed for keeping him close to the ground, not for launching attacks. His ears, those magnificent radar dishes, were perpetually perked, swiveling independently to capture every rustle of leaf, every distant siren, every whispered secret of the canine community. His tail, a mere nub of perpetual enthusiasm, was a blur of pure joy. He was, in short, the embodiment of adorable. We'd barely made it through the double-gated entrance when a voice, sharp and laced with an almost theatrical disapproval, sliced through the cheerful cacophony. Oh, for heaven's sake. That dog! My stomach tightened. I knew that voice. It belonged to Karen. Karen, with her perfectly coiffed blonde bob, her designer athleisure wear that probably cost more than my rent, and her poodle, Princess Fluffybutt III, a creature of such delicate sensibilities that it trembled if a butterfly dared to flutter too close. Karen was the self-appointed guardian of Willow Creek Dog Park, the self-proclaimed expert on all things canine, and, unfortunately, the resident purveyor of unwarranted judgment. Barnaby, blissfully unaware of the impending drama, was already sniffing a particularly interesting patch of grass with the intense concentration of a bomb disposal expert. His stubby legs propelled him forward, a furry torpedo of curiosity. I offered Karen a tight, forced smile. "Hello, Karen. Beautiful day, isn't it?" She sniffed, a delicate, dismissive sound. "It was," she said, her gaze fixed on Barnaby with an unnerving intensity. Princess Fluffybutt III, a cloud of white fluff with beady, judgmental eyes, was pressed against Karen's impeccably clean leggings, emitting a series of high-pitched yips that sounded suspiciously like a tiny, pampered alarm system. "Barnaby's just settling in," I explained, trying to keep my tone light. "He loves this park." "He loves it?" Karen's voice rose, attracting the attention of a few other dog owners who were now subtly glancing our way. "Well, I don't know if we love him being here." My smile faltered. "I'm sorry, what do you mean?" Karen took a step forward, her chin held high. Princess Fluffybutt III mirrored her stance, puffing out her chest in what I could only assume was an attempt at looking formidable. "I mean," Karen enunciated each word with painstaking clarity, "that dog is intimidating." I blinked. Intimidating? Barnaby? The dog who, just moments ago, had been trying to befriend a discarded plastic bag? The dog whose most aggressive act was to occasionally trip over his own feet? Intimidating? I repeated, a disbelieving laugh escaping my lips. "Karen, he's a Corgi." "Precisely," she declared, as if I'd just confessed to a heinous crime. "They have that low, menacing posture, and those teeth. You can see them when he pants." I glanced down at Barnaby, who was now enthusiastically